Hey everyone, can you hear me? Everyone, can you hear me? If you're watching right now, oh, looks like, yeah, give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. So this is put into there. Oh, am I still? Are we still good? Hey, I see that 3 of you are watching. Can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me okay? I'm pretty sure it's working. We're going to get started at 5:30. I just wanted to get this thing running, make sure it all worked. Hey, I see that 3 of you are watching. Can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me okay? I'm pretty sure it's working. We're going to get started at 5:30. I just wanted to get this thing running, make sure it all worked. Really. Hey, Bella.
Hey, Kevin. How's it looking?
It looks good. Just so you know, you're live on YouTube. There's 3 people watching.
Woo.
So I'm gonna just test to make sure that the viewers can hear you too. You know, hear other people on the call. Hey, Bella. Hey, Kevin. Yep. How's it looking? It looks good. Just so you know, you're live on YouTube. It's working great.
Okay. You can hop off if you want.
Okay.
Yeah, we're good. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you. We'll see you
All right.
soon.
See you soon.
Bye.
All right. It's working. Bookmarks. Hide bookmarks bar, and let's go c19.yrk.link. Cool. And let's just see what it looks like when I present. Let's see here. Recent. Type. Hey, if you just showed up, we're gonna get started in a little bit. 5:30, so that's about 35 minutes. Just doing a little testing, make sure everything's working good, getting a little set up. Okay, so that will work fine. And how does it look over here? Yeah, that should work. All right. So do I need this open for any reason? No. Do need that open. Don't need this open. Testing 1, 2, 3.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Okay. And we're live. We've got a couple people watching the stream. If you are watching the stream, could you give me a thumbs up and tell me that you can hear me? Press that like button.
And live. People watching the stream, if you are watching the stream, could you give me a thumbs up and tell me that you can hear me? Press that like button.
I'm also going to elevate the screen a bit, so I'm not looking down as much. There's a little feedback there. Three watching now. Great.
Watching now, great.
Okay, I'll be right back.
Okay, I'll be right back.
Okay, I just posted in the York School faculty staff chat to see if people can hear and see me okay. So if you're in the YouTube video and you can see and hear me okay, give me the thumbs up. Press that like button. Oh, there's Kim Keys. It's coming through. And Kim can hear me as well. That's good news. Great. We're going to get started at 5:30. And there's a little bit of delay on my end, not your end, but so that would be about a little over 20 minutes. Thanks, Kim. How's your cat? It totally works. I know, it's kind of a miracle. All right. I'm gonna mute my camera and my Hey everyone, welcome to the York School Alumni Reunion, the first virtual one we've ever had. This is pretty awesome. We've got people coming in to watch it. Give me a thumbs up, press the like button if you can hear me. We're gonna get started in about 7 or 8 minutes. Oh my goodness, Anna's here. We ran into each other on the trail in Toro. She watched me take my boys for a mountain bike ride and watch Sam try to send it down a really steep trail. It's good to see you. I'm glad you're here.
Going on now.
Hey, Doug.
Kev, how are ya?
Doing good. Just so you know, you're live on YouTube right now.
All right, thank you. Well, Michelle's behind me eating potato chips, so hopefully no one can hear that. How are you?
Doing good. Doing good.
Good.
Yeah, I'm
Good.
excited for this. This is really
Yeah,
cool.
it's gonna be great. Hi, Kate.
Hi, how are you?
How are you?
Doing pretty well.
Good.
Hey, Kate. Good to see you. Just so you know, we're live on YouTube right now.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Across the world. Let's do this. A little better. Kevin, are you still at school?
I am.
Yeah. Kate, I can see you're at home.
Yes, I am, as usual.
Sadly, huh?
Welcome everybody who came in, just showed up to the live stream. Glad you're here. We're going to get started in a few minutes.
Kevin, is Emily supposed to come into this meet, correct?
That's my understanding. She's invited to it. Bella could probably answer that question more, accurately than me. But that's my understanding.
Okay, great.
Ah, what did I do? There we go. Oh, Bella just chimed in the YouTube chat. Emily has the link and should be here any minute.
All right, cool.
Chris says, I hear potato chips. Kettle chips, jalapeno flavored, my weakness.
I know that is. Those are good. Those are good. No.
Joyce says, yep, crunching is coming through loud and clear.
Across the world.
This is way too much fun.
It's the last time you invite me.
Yeah. Oh.
And Scott Johnson is making Seinfeld jokes, I think. These pretzels are making me thirsty.
There's a delay. Okay.
Doug, do you have a slide deck or anything, or you just want to?
I do not. I do not.
I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we don't see this slide deck anymore. So whatever foiled the live stream at commencement last night will not happen tonight. Last night the sun came out right as we started and fried the computer we were using.
It was awesome. It was awesome.
It's so funny. We had to throw the computer under the table to cool it off, and I'm crouching with my butt sticking out of the table.
It worked though. I watched the replay. It was great.
Yeah, it was pretty good quality. I was pretty happy with it.
Good. Really good.
Yeah.
No, we're a couple
Emily
minutes.
is having trouble joining. Okay. I will work on the back end with Bella and making sure that she can get in.
Great.
Doug, do you want to get us started? It's 5:30 now.
Emily's not here yet.
I'm working on getting her in. She's the last speaker, right?
Nope, she's the first.
Oh, she's the first? Okay. I've given her another way to get in. She's having a hard time getting in.
Okay. I just want to make sure she's here before, because I'm going to introduce her.
Okay, yeah, no, that makes sense. So hang on tight, guys. We are getting ready to roll. Emily's here.
Welcome, Emily. We're glad you're here.
I am too.
Well, welcome everyone, all York alumni, and I know faculty and staff and parents and others are on the live stream tonight. I want to welcome you. I'm Doug Key, head of school at York School, and tonight we have our first of two sessions, one tonight and one tomorrow, for a virtual York School alumni reunion. And I want to welcome everyone for joining us tonight. After Dr. Emily Gill speaks, we will also have Kate Popke, who is a rising senior, and I'll introduce her a little later, and Kevin Brickhauser, who is the Director of Technology and Innovation, who will also present. So I hope you can stick around to hear both of them speak after Emily talks. But let me introduce our guest of honor. Emily Gill is the York class of 1995. She is a senior lecturer at the Department of General Practice and Primary Healthcare, University of Auckland, and a rural general practitioner, and Emily, forgive me if I mispronounce these Maori words, in Te Kaha and Opotiki. She is the 2017-18 New Zealand Commonwealth Fund Harkness Fellow and has published peer-reviewed articles on the management of diabetes in aged care facilities, cardiovascular disease risk assessments, and care coordination in the community setting. Dr. Gill lectures the year 5 and 6 University of Auckland medical students and is the project lead for the development of a Toi Ora practice-based research network for the Bay of Plenty District Health Board. Dr. Gill's current research interests are in clinical informatics and care coordination. And I am honored to welcome her as a New York graduate. We're so glad you're here, Emily, so thank you so much.
Great. Thank you very much. And thanks for the introductions. Yes, it's always a bit disconcerting when the technology fails you right at the crucial moment. So the technology is still challenging me, but I will give this a go.
Great.
It sounds like there might be some feedback. I'm going to begin in a way that is a New Zealand Māori way. I muri te waka Mayflower ka tai atu o kutupuna ki America. I puta mai aho I tamaki makoru. Ko manga ki te manga, ko tamaki te awa. Ko Ivor Jones, toko hoa rangatira, no nā te pikiao o te aroa waka ia. Ko nei tai Maui iwi turanga wawai ko Emily Takoingoa. Now, before I explain what that was about, I'm just going to share my presentation. If I can. All right. I'm struggling with sort of the visuals. Is my PowerPoint slide coming through?
Yep, we can see it.
Perfect. Okay. All right. So that was the beginning in the Indigenous language of New Zealand. And I use that te reo Māori to start a discussion today, because for me, upholding the language and cultural practice has really helped me learn about fairness as I've become a New Zealander. So in that introduction, I deliberately chose to tell you about my ancestry, which is one ancestors who arrived in America at the time of the Mayflower. But I myself was actually born in New Zealand, and I've married Ira Jones, who affiliates with the Te Arawa tribe. So the purpose of me sharing that with you is a specific process called whakawhanongatanga. Whakawhanongatanga is the idea that when we start a discussion and meet somebody else or start a meeting, we choose how we introduce ourselves in a very specific way to sort of set the stage for what our discussion is going to be. So I'll just share a little bit more. For instance, hopefully on the screen you can see an ancestor of mine called Judge Jonathan Corwin, and that is his house there on the left. It's in Salem, Massachusetts, from a long time ago. I just thought I chuckled when I then was going to bring up a picture of the house I grew up with in Santa Cruz when I was going to York. And I was just struck by some similarities, even though it's sort of 400 years later. So that's a little bit about me and where I've come from a family or heritage background. But of course, for discussing with you guys now, part of this is about connecting through our York connection. So what I'm wondering is if you guys could help in this discussion, because a discussion is about, after all, two-way communication. So I was wondering if you could open another browser window or pull out another device. And there's going to be a lag here, so I'm going to take my time. And I'm wondering if people can enter in the URL that's at the top of the screen, or that I think should be in the comment section underneath the YouTube, in the comment section, and enter that in and let me know who all is watching. Hopefully there's at least a few of you. And of course, I have been a little bit biased about the class of 1995. And while you're doing this, because I think I'm not seeing, oh, there we go, fantastic. While you guys are doing that, I'm just going to sort out some technical issues on my end. And you'll be able to, we're just going to see who all is joining us. Cool. There's a few of people coming through. And this is going to help, this idea of understanding who's in the room, essentially, is also, that's a really important concept I've been learning as I've become a New Zealander now. Okay. Where are we up to? Cool. So at least a few of us. Awesome. There's at least another peer of mine. Brilliant. I appreciate there's a little bit of a lag here. Oh, there we go. One of the great things about establishing a connection is that sometimes it takes time. So thank you for your patience. It's interesting for me as well. Doug, well done on your pronunciation of Māori, and it's always fun to learn a new language, and it's certainly one of the things I gained from York was being able to solidify and learn another language, which was French, and that is a big part of the story that I'll be sharing in a few minutes with my time with Doctors Without Border. So, and I think half the battle with learning a new language is just giving it a go. Well, it's looking like we've got about 13 people who have been able to access that poll, and awesome that it's, at this stage, it's most of you more recent graduates, or at least in the last 20 years. So very cool. I might move on, and there's going to be other opportunities to join this discussion. So we'll see if a few more people join us in a little bit. So because I am of the class of 1995, and this is about a reunion and reminiscing, I just thought I'd share a picture of the group that really helped form me as who I am as a person. And so when I was thinking about the reunion and what legacy York left me with, the spending time in the quad was a really big part of that. And I'm assuming that is still part of the cultural experience of York. And one of the things that really struck me in terms of the concept of fairness is I think York really enabled a place where the natural diversity of gender and sexual orientation were empowered. And that helped me learn about just social norms. And it really wasn't until I left York and home and arrived at university that I realized actually homophobia and sexism, for instance, were alive and well still, which sort of surprised me, because I think the York, for me anyway, the legacy from York was I thought those were sort of historic social norms. So I'm really grateful to that nurturing environment of York. So again, this is going to be another opportunity to just let me know a bit about who I'm talking with. Would you guys mind just filling in a couple of words about when you think of your time at York and perhaps some of the legacies and how it's impacted your life the most? And I suppose because this is anonymous, you can put things that were negative too. Of course, we always like to think it's all positive, but maybe there was something negative. So I'll just give everybody a few minutes here to see if anybody's able to contribute. And let's see. For other people who are watching and can communicate with me, if there's any technical difficulties, please let me know. Oh, there we go. Look at that. That's cool.
Yeah, the poll everywhere is working great. We're not seeing it on the slide deck, but we're not seeing the results.
No, well, that you should be. So that means you're not seeing my presentation. So
yeah, we just see it does say on the bottom of the screen, start the presentation to see live content. So I don't know if you started the presentation.
I have. So you guys have already missed quite a bit. So let me just figure this out, because thanks for the feedback, because otherwise it doesn't really make sense what I'm going to say, because I'm speaking to images.
It still makes sense. We saw all your images. We just didn't see the live results.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, no. We can see your slide deck, no problem.
So can you see the results now? Because there's lots of words in the word cloud coming out.
No, it says total results 0. We see the slide that says what York legacy has impacted your life the most, and it says total results 0.
It must be a time lag. I'm going to go back. Can you see a change in the slides now?
Yeah, I don't think there's a time
now,
lag. We didn't see the class year results either. We did see your chart. It was just an empty chart.
What do you see now?
The blank blue slide with the what York legacy.
Oh dear. Well, what I'll do is I will show these. I can screenshot these and share these later. So I'll just read out what I'm seeing, and I don't understand why you're not seeing them. But a lot of people are writing things like relationships, friendships, diverse, supportive, Latin, ideas, strong environment, open-mindedness, connections, history. So yes, it is a shame that you can't see these results, but yeah, it's similar to what I had. And so on that note of thank you for sharing, and I'm sorry I can't share that with you. What I wanted to just acknowledge now is the people in our year who we've actually lost already. So that's Leslie, Nick, and Sunny. So that is going to bring to the end of my time of Whakawhanaungatanga, which is about reconnecting with Yorkies and bringing a bit of where I came from through my ancestry. So now I'm going to move on to the more monologue part. And so hopefully you're going to be able to see these pictures. And while I'm doing that, there should be a poll function that's going to come through where you can submit questions. All right, so it's not really surprising that I ended up working for Doctors Without Border, especially with the ancestry I've just told you. I do come from a settler ancestry in the British, early British American colonies. And through hard work and wealth was able to be passed on from one generation to the next. And that has set up a cycle that over many years has enabled me to have many opportunities in life and pretty much a guaranteed education that afforded me the chance to really choose how I directed my life. And I just wanted to acknowledge that and think about this because when I went to West Africa as part of working with Doctors Without Border, the thing that struck me the most was that I was meeting people who didn't come from this background. In contrast, what the people who I met in West Africa had experienced was generations of war that were often impacted by international socio-political dynamics that people had no choice over. And in that war and extreme poverty, people lose resources. And so people ended up having to lose their inherited wealth through land loss, being displaced, and that leads to the cycle of needing to have subsistence living. And there's just a lack of opportunity and even the risk of not even getting access to education. So the people that I met, especially the young children, there was no guarantee that they were going to have many choices in life. And both my ancestors and their ancestors, we all work really hard through the generations. The difference is that the hard work in my background has led to intergenerational choice and opportunity, whereas for the people that I met in Africa, the hard work was about survival. So Doctors Without Border is an organization that was founded in the 1970s, and it's defined as a humanitarian organization. That's different from volunteer organizations that do developmental work and human rights. Humanitarian is about addressing crises. And there's a charter that we all as volunteers subscribe to where we are our purpose is to relieve distress for populations who face acute stress. And it's generally wars, or it can be environmental disasters as well. Part of that charter, though, is also to speak out. So though Doctors Without Border is not specifically a human rights organization, if atrocities are witnessed, the charter binds us, demands that we speak out against atrocities observed. And for that, Doctors Without Border won the Nobel Peace Prize. The places that I was able to go to with Doctors Without Border were Ivory Coast and Burkina Faso in West Africa. For Ivory Coast, the reason the population was in distress was because of civil war. In Burkina Faso, it was really climate change. So it's very close to the Sahara Desert, and as land became less and less habitable, the country was in dire poverty and had a huge amount of malnutrition. The next few slides, I want to just show you what life was like, because in some ways it was not much different from my life now. Where I live in New Zealand is a rural community. And in both places in West Africa, I was based in rural communities. This was the township where I was in Ivory Coast, a town called Giglo, which was not far from the Liberian border. I worked in a clinic, as I do in New Zealand, a family medicine clinic. So this was the clinic where I worked in Ivory Coast. And here's an example of me seeing patients. And this picture could be taken in a Portuguese as well, where I'm a family medicine doctor and see families and children. Family medicine in New Zealand, anyway, it covers pediatrics as well. Part of the work that I do here in New Zealand, because I'm a rural doctor, is we go to remote satellite clinics. And I know that this exists in the US as well, where a car is packed up with supplies and you travel to an even more remote community that doesn't have a permanent clinic, but will have a visiting clinic once a week. We did the same thing in West Africa in the 2 missions that I was working with. So here's an example from one of those clinics and some people coming to see us. Here's a picture in Burkina Faso, which also sort of demonstrates the land that is just becoming drier and drier as the Sahara advances, partly because of climate change and deforestation. As with my life in New Zealand, you enjoy social moments with your colleagues over lunch. So this was a group of us on our way back from a remote clinic, stopping off at a local restaurant. And like I do in New Zealand, I lived in a house, had a bedroom. We'd have our meals together as volunteers. The house also had an office where we did our paperwork and reports. We had computers. I think you can see the satellite phones there in the background. And of course, it was a social time. We'd have our social events just like anybody does. So this was actually my 30th birthday party. And it was also, I think, our farewell was towards the end of the mission. And this was in Ivory Coast. And I just wanted to highlight that though there was the incredible suffering that I observed with malnutrition, particularly in Burkina Faso and in Ivory Coast, it was malnutrition, but also the sort of explosion of HIV infections because of the Civil War. The mechanics and the day-to-day life was not much different from what any of us experience in our working life, with all the delights of life of people with different senses of humor, different personalities, different food types. So it was just a really enriching work experience, I would say. But the thing that perhaps affected me the most, I would say, is that the difference between here, where I'm working now in New Zealand, and working in West Africa, is that these friends and colleagues who on a day-to-day level, it was like any other working environment, was that the friends and colleagues and patients that I was meeting, their future was less certain than mine. They didn't have choices that I had. And that was deeply frustrating and sad. And that's because of unfair systems. So I'm going to move in and just describe what I mean by unfair systems. So around the world, this difference between one group of people and another and how that impacts on health has been well described. internationally between countries and within countries. The differences that happen between groups that are understood to be unfair are called inequities. So for example, if there are two groups of people and one group from when they are born have a lower life expectancy than the other, that's not fair. If that trend you can discern from even before pregnancy because of access to maternity care, that's unfair. It can even continue through life where one group has less access to dental care than another group. It can go through the rest of life, such as in two groups that have disability, if a subset of defined by one characteristic doesn't get access to disability equipment as much as the other group, that's not fair. And these unfairnesses, they are different from natural differences. So for instance, only people with prostates get prostate cancer. Only people with cervixes get cervical cancer. That's a natural difference. These differences are unfair. Now, researchers around the world have tried to change systems to make things more fair, and specifically around deaths. So the deaths that are attributed to these unfair qualities are called amenable deaths. But imagine if even with efforts to address that, there's still one group whose amenable death rate doesn't really get impacted by those changes. So this is where I'm going to hopefully bring you all in again, and I know you may not be able to see the results, but would you mind going back to the poll and let's just see how many of you are right-handed versus left-handed? Okay, a few more coming through. So far in this group, we have a majority of left-handed viewers than right-handed viewers. Oh, now it's evening up. Okay, we've got about, now it's turning into what I more expected. We've had about 12 people respond so far with, here we go, almost 80% being right-handed, which is, I think, more in keeping with what the natural population is of right-handed versus left-handed. All right, so we've got a clear majority of viewers who are right-handed. So, and I'm sure you all know somebody who's left-handed, even though left-handed people are in the minority. I'm going to bring back up those graphs. So what would you think if you're left-handed, or you have a left-handed friend or family member, and we're told that the left-handed lines were, the blue lines were people who were left-handed, that left-handed people for some reason weren't going to live as long, that they weren't going to get as good dental care, that if they happened to also have a disability, that they weren't going to get the right equipment they needed. And even when people tried to address this problem between left-handed and right-handed people, it actually only just benefited the right-handed people. At least for me, that would really anger me. But even more than perhaps being angered, I'd just be like, that doesn't make sense. There's no inherent difference between left-handed and right-handed. Why are there so many worse outcomes for left-handed people versus right-handed people? Now, the thing about addressing fairness is that sometimes, especially when people are talking about systems, people think about division of resources. Well, when you think about health, one of the things we think about is the concept of flourishing, where every person has the ability to fully be who they are, who they want to be, and make all the choices that that suit them. Hold on a second, I'm just having a difficulty on my end. flourishing is an excellent goal for everybody. And the point about flourishing I wanted to make is that it's limitless. So here's the definition I was looking for. It's a state of continually growing and being enhanced. And we lose nothing by sharing the power of flourishing with others. In a world where we all flourished fairly, there would still only be those with prostates who get prostate cancer and only those with cervixes who get cervical cancer. Health problems would continue to exist, and there would be those natural differences. But in a society where each of us is able to flourish, there are still choices to be made, purpose to pursue, even with the inevitable sufferings of life. And striving for that is about striving for equity and fairness. Now, you may have suspected that the unfair differences in the health graphs I showed you, though they certainly apply to the West Africans I met, are actually about New Zealand. I'm going to bring them back up. And the difference between the orange and blue line is between Māori and non-Māori. The citizens of New Zealand, some of them face these unfair differences. Māori, and actually, that's my husband and my in-laws and my children. So it does get personal quite quickly. Here's a picture of that lovely family that I've been married into. And a shout out to Kelly Cummins of class of 1995, who was able to come out and be with us. So to understand why these unfairnesses happen, I'm going to now just speak to the New Zealand context, but I think there could be learnings from the US perspective as well, because we do share a significant shared history, which I'll get to in a moment. So in New Zealand, the system we currently have began in 1840 with the signing of a treaty. It's called the Treaty of Waitangi, or Te Tiriti in Māori. Te Tiriti lays out a foundation of fair and equal partnership that allows all New Zealanders to flourish, both Māori and all those who came after. It's a partnership document that legally allows all of us who are non-Indigenous and non-Māori to be here in New Zealand, including me as a recent settler or immigrant. This partnership, though, comes with terms of settlement. And that terms of settlement is an ongoing living without end partnership. It's not just finished with past breaches are addressed. It's not just finished with, say, reparations. Now, the system that was unfair, so with that wonderful Te Tiriti that we have that sort of created the sovereign state of New Zealand, what happened, you might ask? Well, it was the global unfair system of British colonialism. And that's where our story with the United States is connected. And it's also connected to the ancestor that I mentioned right at the beginning. British colonialism was born in the early colonies of America, and it arrived in New Zealand in the 1800s. Despite Te Tiriti, this treaty, the principles of the 1840 treaty were breached basically from the day it was signed and continues to this day. Now, colonialism is a process of dominating specific peoples and their territories in New Zealand, that is Māori, for the purposes of acquiring economic power in New Zealand that was for the Crown. Domination requires a hierarchy, so all of us who are not at the apex of that British colonial hierarchy actually also suffer under this system. So I'll just be clear about that apex of British hierarchy that happened as part of colonialism. It was having British ancestry, having higher socioeconomic position, including access to wealth and education, and it was about being Christian, heterosexual, male, able-bodied, and classified with the term white skin coloration. Now, there's a bunch of history in there that I'd encourage you all to explore and understand, because like with every group of people, we're not monolithic. There's differences. And so within that British colonial system, that's not to say all British people wanted this hierarchy or even supported it. And indeed, the Te Tiriti that I was just telling you about only came about because the Queen wanted a consensual document for when British people came here. So this is not all one group is one thing or all one group is another. But the system of British colonialism was based on a hierarchical system. The challenge we all face now is how to address the ongoing unfairness that is occurring that's due to a system of colonialism for the last 400 years. In New Zealand, we have this Te Tiriti as a clear path towards a fair and equal society. And in the US, you have the Constitution, which is also a very powerful document of about equality. So to bring it back to York, and as you think about unfair systems, education is clearly a key to help us identify unfair biases we all unconsciously have because of the system we're born into. That, and evidence for me is my understanding of gender and sexual orientation, natural diversity was formed at York. York seems to be an excellent vehicle, and from the cloud words that you weren't able to see, but that you guys fed back through the survey, it does seem to be an excellent vehicle to strive towards undoing unfair systems and establishing mechanisms for a fair society for us all. So I'm going to just quickly perhaps open up the another survey to see from if, and maybe this might help Doug and the others, what might have made York more fair? Is there anything that you recall from your time there that could have been different or better? Or was it just a really good place to set the stage for all of us to think about these things in our formative years? And I only have one more slide after this. So if you want to make a few comments, and then I will close with one last slide and hand back over to Doug. So I'll just make sure the poll is active. Okay. Not getting any responses just yet. The other thing that I might do is I might just leave these polls open for a little while, and perhaps you might just want to think about it and write something later. What I was going to finish on, and I know we've gone over time, was a slide about, oh, yes, somebody jumping in there. Anyway, I'll just finish on this slide, and I wanted to leave us with this quote because it's related to education. I recently learned about Paulo Freire from Brazil, and who had this to say: humankind's central problem is affirming one's identity as human, which everyone strives for, but oppression interrupts many people on this journey. These halts are termed dehumanization. And dehumanization, when individuals become objectified, occurs due to injustice, exploitation, and oppression. And his work is about how, through education, these things can be overdone. Thank you very much for bearing with the technical difficulties. And I did have and I'll, because you can't see the results of the poll, I'll finish there and stop screen sharing. Thank you.
Emily, thank you very much. Kevin, were there any questions in the chat that we should present?
There was a comment from Ben Morgan talking about how he had lost his left-handed status because of an accident as a child. I didn't see any other questions for Dr. Gill.
Okay, great. I'll just see if there's any more coming through on my end. Now, am I still screen sharing or not?
Yes, you are.
Okay, how do I do that? I'll just see if I can. There we go. Stop presenting. That might be helpful. There we go. And I will just see if there are any other comments coming through from the poll. But thank you. No, it doesn't look like anybody's had any questions.
Emily, thank you so much for joining us. I know it's midday there in New Zealand, so I appreciate you taking time out of your day. I really appreciate it, and it's great to have fantastic York alumni all across the globe. So it was fascinating. Thank you.
Do you have any questions for me or wanted to clarify anything?
You know, I think, you know, as you were presenting, what came up for me was you've seen different medical medical systems around the world. And it was curious to me that you've been in New Zealand, you've been in Africa, you've been in the United States. And I was wondering what you saw as the biggest differences between medical systems around the world, especially as it relates to inequity.
Well, that's actually a pretty easy one to answer from my perspective. And for me, because these systems are really at the core of the unfair things, it's how the health systems are funded and how they're governed. So fortunately and unfortunately for Americans, the US health system is sort of unique in developing countries for having linked the funding of healthcare to employment as opposed to as a social service. And so American healthcare is very diverse. And so there are pockets of places where it seems to be more fair for people and pockets where it's very unfair. And whereas, say, in places like New Zealand, we have our healthcare is more funded through what we call universal healthcare. And so that we still have obviously our inequities that we need to face, but it is, at least we have a template that might be able to lead towards more fairness. And at the moment, we're actually trying to talk about how to make it even more fair. And the crux of being even more fair actually will be to honor Te Tiriti, our treaty, and have co-governance of our whole health system, where you have the Ministry of Health, who represents the Crown, and a new body, a Māori Health Authority, that co-commissions and decides how money is spent for services that are most appropriate for Māori. And that gets people into an uncomfortable conversation, but that, I think, is where you can really make changes. And of course, in Africa, there was not a system. And so you can see when there is no system at all, then things are really, really unfair.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And I guess a follow-up question to that would be reading about New Zealand's response to COVID-19 and relative to other countries. It was more successful. And what do you attribute that to? Do you attribute that to the social system, or?
We have a few advantages. So we're further away from the epicenter. We're an island, so our borders are more easily controlled. But we also, I think, very importantly, have a quite high level of trust in our health system. So, and I think Dr. Fauci has had a similar popularity in the US, but certainly our equivalent, his name was Dr. Ashley Bloomfield. He had just a lot of respect. And the other thing, of course, is our health system worked very closely with the government. So our prime minister would effectively turn over to the director general of health and say, okay, what do we need to do here? So it was just that was an example of perhaps just a bit more collective approach, like we're going to do this all together. And maybe the last thing I would say is that there is very strong memory from the 1918 pandemic in New Zealand, which very disproportionately impacted Māori families. And so actually it was one of the places where I work in rural New Zealand that led the country in New Zealand in our COVID response, because it was the Māori community, because they remembered what happened. The stories were still so present about what happened in 1918 that they said, right, we are shutting down. Even before the government shut down the borders, there were communities in New Zealand who shut down the community. They were called community safety zones, and there were roadblocks and saying, no, if you haven't been here, if you come here, you're going to go home and self-isolate for 2 weeks. So yeah, it was a very collective approach, I think.
Great. Kevin, any other questions in the chat, or?
No, just a lot of appreciation, Dr. Gill. Lots of gratitude for your presentation and enlightening us with your experience and your personal stories.
Well, thanks for listening, and I'm happy to be contacted if anybody has any further thoughts. I actually have a few more minutes, so I might just stay on and listen in if that's okay.
That'd be great. Thanks, Emily. We'd appreciate that, and hopefully I'll get to see you sometime in person.
Sounds great.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Emily. I appreciate it. I know we have two other short presentations. I want to introduce Kate Popke, who is a senior this year She'll be graduating in May of 2021. Kate is the student body president, and in general, just an awesome student and person. And so I am honored to give Kate the floor to talk about what it's like being a York student in 2020. Kate.
Hi, thank you so much for that introduction. I just really quickly wanted to comment on Dr. Gill's presentation. I really found it interesting to learn about inequity that, some people are just born into. It's not something that an individual has done in their life that, brings them into that situation. And I was happy to hear her story just because I think breaking from those patterns and creating those flourishing communities does start with the individual and sharing your story. So yeah, I was grateful to hear about all of that. And as Mr. Key introduced me, my name is Kate Popke, and I'm going into my 4th year at the lovely York School as student body president. As you can probably imagine, my past year at York has probably looked a bit different than the junior year you all have experienced. Going into distance learning, I was pretty skeptical and worried about the transition. But as soon as school started with the distance learning program, I was really grateful that I was at York. The classes were shorter and more flexible, and I really felt that they took everyone's circumstances into consideration. We had a lot of time to check in with teachers and to collaborate with other classmates and maintain that connection peer-to-peer. And of course, we continue to have those break meetings with all 230-something of us. Those digital break meetings were definitely different and, of course, something to adjust to. It was a bit hectic with a couple of interesting comments in the chats, a few too many reaction emojis going on, and a lot of announcements with glitchy pauses in the middle of a sentence. But it really helped me to appreciate the fact that I had the opportunity to see every person at some point during those break meetings. And it was also crazy to see that even with the distance and the virtual screen separating us, we were truly still York School and all of our quirks and silly traditions. I was happy to accept our break meetings with open arms because it ultimately reminded me of the amazing group that'll be waiting for me back on campus when hopefully, fingers crossed, we can reunite. In all honesty, I know this has been a scary time for everyone. Nothing is certain and it can be hard to see the bright side sometimes, but at the end of the day, York has really been there for us as students, giving us flexibility and support every step of the way, which I'm sure you all have experienced too. My experiences this year have really helped me to appreciate the little things in life and to just take things one day at a time. While we're going to be starting this year with distance learning, I'm really confident that York will remain the same supportive community until we can all be reunited on campus once again. So that's been my experience, and I hope it's comforting to hear that coming from York and to hear that York is still such a supportive and great community to be a part of. So thank you.
Thank you, Kate. I really appreciate that, and I hope that York alumni that are online will recognize that I think Kate represents what I've discovered in my first year as head of school, that whether you're a York student in 2020 or a York student from other decades, you all have something in common. You're bright, you're intelligent, you're committed, you're passionate, you're articulate. So I want to thank Kate for coming and spending some time with us today. Thanks, Kate.
Of course, thank you.
So you've heard his voice today, Kevin Brookhauser, who is Director of Technology and Innovation, and he is going to give a short presentation on some of the work that he and some students and one of our other teachers, Dr. Jeff Hanna, have done to respond to COVID-19 in the local community. So Kevin, it's all yours.
Thanks, Doug. All right. So it's pretty tough to follow up Dr. Gill and Kate, but I'm going to do my best here. I'm going to talk a little bit about what some of my colleagues and I and some students did in response to the coronavirus locally. And I feel obligated to disclose something that I think is really obvious to my colleagues, but I feel like we need to say it, or I need to say it, because I know I'm not a hero. We're going to talk about things that happened in the sphere of people who were heroes, people like Dr. Gill, who's out there really helping people, putting herself on the line. This is what true heroes look like here in Monterey County, who put themselves in the very front, put themselves and their families at risk to help others. So I needed to get that out first. But so let's talk a little bit about what's going on in some of the classes that are happening here at York. And if you're an alum and you remember me, if you started in 2002 or later, you may think of me as a English and history teacher. My background is in the humanities, but I have moved over to the technology side. Not really the science department, but there's a fair amount of course, overlap between science and technology, and that's a lot of what I do now here at York. And this is from a meme that I found on the internet. Science can tell you how to clone a T-Rex, but the humanities can tell you why it's a bad idea. One of the things that I love about York is that we have such great collaboration between the science teachers and the humanities teachers, and I've had the opportunity to kind of have my feet in both of those departments, being involved in technologies, but also having that background in technology or in the humanities. And when I started teaching a technology class, I still tried to keep the humanities as a part of my class, which is what all of my colleagues in the science and math department do as well. It's really a cool experience here at York. So the class that I teach is called Code and Design. And it is it's an introduction to computer programming and product development. And we use the design thinking process. And if you're familiar with it, it's a process that came out of Stanford University. And it is a method that people use to attempt to solve problems using product development or finding solutions. And it's a human-centered focus. So it is a very specific process, and I walk my students through it, and then we go out and look for problems, real world problems that we can solve using this process, and then also using some technical skills that we learn along the way. So we do cover computer programming in my class, and all students get a fundamental understanding in a variety of computer programming languages. We also work deeply in electronics. My students learn about basic electronics, how to program a microprocessor and how to wire it up and how to connect it to sensors and actuators to make things happen. Then we also do a fair amount of design. So we do like 3D modeling and other kind of CAD work as well. And we take our design work and we sometimes print them out on these 3D printers. And I've got to confess, when I started taking on the role and working in this great new space called the Design Shop, which is this maker lab, there was this big trend about 3D printers, and everyone was so fired up about 3D printers. And I got to tell you, I didn't really see the great utility of 3D printers when I first was exposed to them. I thought they were really cool technology, and that by itself gets me kind of excited. But my interest in 3D printers waned pretty quickly because I couldn't see any application for them beyond just, making cool keychains or figures of Yoda or whatever. But what we've discovered in my class and what my students have helped me discover is that we can make really good use out of this technology. This is a model of the Griffith Observatory in Los Angeles. And some of my students designed this and printed it out. And we were approached by a teacher from Los Angeles and another teacher from San Francisco. Word got out that we were interested in 3D design and 3D models. And these teachers are TVIs, teachers of visually impaired students. And they said they had a very great need for architectural models of the work of the buildings around their students. So it was an epiphany for me to realize that people who are visually impaired, when they go into a building, it's difficult for them to have a sense of space. And so if they were to tour the Griffith Observatory, they wouldn't really get a clear sense of what that space was. So they asked us to design and print these models of these places where their students might go so that they could feel where they were going to get a better sense of the space. And so this is my students interacting with those teachers and really learning about what it's like to be somebody else. And that's a really critical part of the design thinking process, is empathizing with your audience. And so we shipped out a bunch of models to teachers in San Francisco and in Los Angeles. We also worked with the School of the Blind that is in San Francisco State University, and they asked us to create a 3D map of their campus so that their students could navigate their campus more effectively. And so this was a map that one could feel. And this is one of my favorite students, Dominic, who used our laser cutter and the 3D design software and Illustrator to create this 3D map. I'm really, really proud of this work. Our students use the design process that they learn and the technology skills, and they go out in the community. Here's a group of students who used the 3D modeling that they learned to create 3D adaptations for everyday household items like a spoon or a fork to help seniors who might have a disability that prevents them from handling small objects. And so they designed these adaptations to help individuals who have a hard time turning a key. They created a adaptation to a key that made it easier to hold. Other students of mine have gone out to work with seniors to talk about cybersecurity. We know that that the bad guys out there on the internet are trying to make victims of our most vulnerable, and a lot of that includes our seniors. And so our students regularly make presentations to local seniors on how to protect themselves online. And then we also have our students going out into the community and working with younger students. So here's one of my star students, Francis, working at the International School of Monterey, teaching robotics and computer programming to a group of 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders. We're really proud. I'm really proud of putting service at the center of this technology class that we're doing. I think that my students learn how to do really good work while also helping others. So my students also learn how to solder and make and do some sort of fabrication through that design thinking process. And here's an example for the alumni. This is Kim Cohan, class of '81, who has his own business involving installing security and setting up systems. He's got a project that's helping the fisheries in Carmel Valley right now, helping to manage that. He came to our class and taught our students about electronics and how to use a multimeter and about Ohm's law. So a shout out to the alumni out there who give back and come back to our classes. Students also do work with the SPCA. This is a project that we worked with a puppy that came from the SPCA who had a neurological disorder that caused her to run into walls and hurt her head, which actually exacerbated the issue. And so students designed a helmet for that dog. And then finally, another organization that we work with is my museum, and it's the local children's museum. Here's a group of students. We redesigned their fire station exhibit using Arduinos and Raspberry Pis, these cool little microprocessors that allow students to be really creative and create interactive products using electronics. So we have a great partnership with the museum that we'll come back to in a second. Here's a group of students redesigning the ATM machine, and they used Android app development to redo the children's ATM exhibit. So that was great up until March showed up, and we had the coronavirus, and everything changed. One thing that I'm really proud that York School decided to do when this crisis hit our entire world was we happened to have a very large stash of N95 masks in our safety shed, and Doug, in his leadership, decided that we needed to take that asset and give it to those who need it the most. And we donated those over 200 masks to local physicians and nurses. We also donated supplies when they were in great demand to a local laboratory that was administering COVID tests. Arc Point Monterey, which is a great business just down the hill from us that was founded by 2 York alumni, Spencer and Bryant Smith. They were in desperate need for hand sanitizer and alcohol and gloves, and we happened to have some. And we were just so thrilled to be able to put that to good use and help Spencer and Bryant with their really amazing mission. So then I was just on Facebook, and the director of my museum sent me a message. This is right when COVID started happening. She sent me a message, any help? There's a family from my museum, and she knows her daughter has health issues. And she wanted to see if my students could help this request. And here's the request. There was a local parent who had whose daughter had an immune compromised condition and had been stuck in the house for about 3 weeks. She couldn't just use a normal mask because she was at greater risk than others, but she couldn't get an N95 mask, and we didn't have one that fit her. So we deployed the tools that we had, including the 3D printer, and we started mocking up ways that we could create an effective mask that was better than just the cloth mask. And so I used my own kit as a model as we began developing, and I sent this file to Frances, the student I mentioned before, and she started printing up a bunch of these masks that you could put a vacuum filter around, which from what we understood at the time was a more effective way to protect this kid. We created other prototypes using our 3D printers, and we got a little we got the opportunity to help that kid for a little bit by using these tools that I had pretty much thought dismissed as useless devices. Thanks to our students who helped. We had this chat going on in the background, trying to come up with the best designs, and Dr. Hannah, our physics teacher, got involved and helped and got the robotics team, which is this amazing robotics team, go Deus Ex Machina, by the way, that use their engineering skills to help us with this project. So that was really gratifying. And then I got this message from a friend of mine who's an ER doctor at CHOMP. And he posted online that he said, construction skilled Monterey peeps need help with a project, ability to cut and work with acrylic, highly valuable, reply here or private message. Well, we here at York actually have a way to cut and work with acrylic with a very precise tool that we have on campus. Thanks to the leadership at York and also thanks to the donors who made it possible. We have an incredible laser cutter here that allows us to work in acrylic and design products with a great deal of precision. What Dr. Bodka was asking for was this thing called a COVID shield. And it was a design that came out of Indonesia, and it was made out of acrylic, or it's intended to be made out of acrylic, and it could help healthcare professionals provide a COVID test to patients. One of the risks of administering the COVID test is you need to either put a swab deep down a patient's nose or deep in a patient's nose or deep into a mouth, depending on the test. And it's possible that it could cause a sneeze reflex, which if a person who has COVID-19 sneezes, it's a really dangerous situation. And so this shield was intended to protect the healthcare worker. And so I said, I bet we could make this. And we rallied our students, and Dr. Hannah got involved, and we started designing them. He also asked if we could design what's called an intubation box. And it is a box that also protects the physician when they have to administer a ventilator on a patient or intubation. And so we went to work. And here's Dr. Hannah. You can see it's dark outside. We were working like until midnight on a lot of these evenings, trying to figure out how we could put these things together. and now we can make them using our laser cutter. And it turned out that we couldn't find brackets that would work to secure these things, so we 3D printed them. We created a website, c19.yrk.link, to open source all the work that we did. And so all of our designs are licensed with the Creative Commons. And I've got to give props out to the robotics team, Dr. Hannah, and particularly Alan, one of our students who is an absolute wizard at Fusion 360, which is a professional level 3D modeling program. And it was just amazing, the design that he created for these models. Now, all of these design files are open source, so you could download these files and print them on your own 3D printer and cut out your own files as well. We spent a lot of time, we created this group chat that was incredibly active. So here are the design files for the swab shield, and here are the design files for the intubation box. Feel free to go to the website and share it out. We're not out of this yet, and so we have these design files ready to go. One of the things that I'm really also grateful for was the acrylic that we used here. We didn't have acrylic on hand, and we needed a lot of it. So we posted online saying, hey, can anyone send us acrylic? And we had people from around the world buying acrylic for us and shipping it to them. And so we were fortunate enough to have a lot of amazing donors who helped us with that. So I'm really, it was just a really inspiring thing. One thing that I have to say is recently I ended up in the ER myself because I got a freak bee sting on my tongue, and I started to get a reaction, and we were worried that I would lose my breathing air. And the ER doctor who helped me said, wait, are you Kevin Brookhauser, the guy that from York that helped get us these shields? And I said, yeah, I am. And I was a little embarrassed. And they were using them. And anyway, it's really gratifying to see that work come to reality, and whatever we can do to help those real heroes out there who are putting themselves at risk, we're stoked about it. So what's next for York and Code and Design, which we're about to launch? Well, we got a lot of great things planned, but we are, I'm most excited that we're going to continue our partnership with My Museum. As you might imagine, museums have been closed for almost 6 months. The aquarium recently announced that their revenue is down over 60%. Museums are in big trouble right now. And the director of My Museum reached out to me and said, is there any way that your students could help our members, these young kids, engage engage in the kind of activities that they might do if the museum were open? And so one of our plans for Code and Design this coming fall is to create online learning experiences that my students will design to help young kids learn about programming, learn about electronics, and allow my students to really grasp the kind of learning that, or the academic knowledge that I'm going to impart on them, and then transfer that knowledge onto younger kids. So in conclusion, we're not going to bring T-Rexes back to life, but I hope that we do use really cool technology in the future to make a positive impact on our community. Thank you.
Great. Kevin, thank you so much. In my first year as head of school, I've been proud of all of our faculty, staff, and students. But when COVID hit and Kevin and Dr. Hannah and his students started working on these projects, it was a highlight of my year. And I hope as alums, you're really proud of that work. And it's my vision that we continue to actually build on this work and do even more of it to serve the local and regional communities. So Kevin, thank you so much. I really appreciate the presentation.
No, thanks for the opportunity to share.
So I will wrap up tonight's session with a reminder about what's on tap for tomorrow. So beginning at 1 p.m. Pacific time, you'll have an opportunity to have some interactive video chats with alumni classmates from different decades. At 2 p.m., we're going to have a design talk with Adam Broadsley, class of 1995. And at 3 p.m., another talk with Dr. Ibrahim Al-Marashi, class of 1991, on the history of pandemics. And we had him speak to our students back in the spring, and it was fascinating. So tomorrow. There's a lot of interesting opportunities for you to reconnect with alumni who are doing great work. Email alumni@york.org for the links to tomorrow's events, and we hope that we see you tomorrow afternoon. And we're so glad that you joined us on a Friday evening. Thank you very much, and have a great evening. Bye-bye.